I cheated on my boyfriend to fit in with a new group of friends, but when I wanted to get away from them, they betrayed me and told my boyfriend everything. Before continuing the story, I ask you for a second to give a like to the video. It doesn't bother you at all and it helps me a lot. Let's continue. I had been with Esteban for 2 years. Our relationship, from the beginning, had been intense, passionate and lively. We complemented each other well. We had chemistry in and out of bed, and for a long time I felt I didn't need anything else. But everything changed when he got that new job. His routine began to revolve exclusively around his job, long hours, late-night calls, emergency emails, and although he tried to be present, he was no longer himself. He would arrive exhausted, fall asleep via non-beings, and even our intimate encounters began to be sporadic. It's not that I stopped loving him, but I did feel that the fire from before was slowly dying out. Looking for something that would help me get out of that monotony and, incidentally, improve my resume, I decided to join a volunteer program linked to an important organization. It was a great professional opportunity, and although it was unpaid, I knew it could open doors for me. However, what I didn't expect was that the group of girls leading the project would be so closed, so selective. At first I felt completely out of place. Everyone seemed to have an internal code, a way of talking, of dressing, of behaving. I could tell they were superficial, but I also understood that if I wanted to stay there long enough to get that blessed constancy with recommendation, I had to fit in. I did everything I could to fit in. I laughed at their jokes, listened to their gossip, feigned interest in topics that bored me. I even went so far as to change the way I dressed to fit in with the group. I hated myself a little inside, but I kept telling myself that it was only for a few months. That it was worth it. And the truth is that in the end they started to like me. They invited me to their meetings, included me in their plans and no longer looked at me as the new girl. Within the group, Alejandra was clearly the one in charge. Everything revolved around her. She was attractive, outgoing, and had important contacts within the volunteer group. If anyone could influence the consistency I would ultimately receive, it was her. On several of our outings, Alejandra would bring her brother. He was a couple of years younger than her and you could tell he knew all about getting attention. He had that mix of arrogance and charm that makes girls look at him twice. I noticed it too. And even more so I noticed him looking at me. He was always finding ways to approach me, to make loose remarks to me, to seek eye contact. He even once offered me a ride home when we left a late meeting. But I always found a way to stay within the group and avoid being alone with him. One night, Alejandra organized a sleepover at her house, as a way of closing ranks with the group. I accepted without much enthusiasm, but I knew I couldn't refuse. They wanted to continue showing me as someone trustworthy, willing to integrate. That night everything seemed normal, with food, music, a little wine, unimportant conversations. But as the hours passed, and as the bottle emptied, the atmosphere changed. The jokes got louder. We started a game of dare that at first seemed innocent, but quickly escalated. First it was simple things, like telling embarrassing secrets or making awkward phone calls. Then came the girl-on-girl kisses, the provocative dances, the off-color comments. I tried to stay on the sidelines, participating just enough so as not to seem boring, but without crossing any lines, until the key moment arrived. She told me that if I slept with her brother that night, they would stop calling me Sanchirona and I would be part of the group completely. He even added that I could talk to the head of the volunteer program so that he could give me excellent references on my final record. He said it all with a smile, as if it was a joke, but we all knew it was not. That comment was loaded with intent. They all laughed, and one of them commented that her brother had had it in for me for a while. At that moment, my mind was blocked. I was aware that Alejandra had a strange relationship with her brother, that they even joked about sleeping together or being too trusting. I always thought they were exaggerating, but it wasn't my problem either. Now, however, they were putting me at the center of that game. They were pushing me to become something I wasn't, but at the same time they were offering me the key to getting exactly what I needed. Fitting in. What's more, I got a crucial recommendation for my professional career. I convinced myself that it wasn't that serious. I told myself that it would only be one night, that no one would know about it, that I could even dispute it. That after all, I had already scored him interested in me from before. I laughed along with them, as if I thought the challenge was funny, and got up saying I was going to the bathroom. But instead, I went up to the second floor. The door to the brothers' room was ajar. I paused for a second, feeling my heart in my throat. I hesitated. I thought about Esteban, about what he was about to do. But my mind kept telling me that it was too late to turn back. That I had gotten myself into it, that I was already broken, and that maybe it didn't matter anymore. I gently pushed the door open and looked out. He was sitting on the bed with his cell phone in his hand. He looked at me in surprise, but didn't say anything. He just smiled, as if he knew exactly why I was there. I walked in without saying a word. He got up and let me pass. What happened that night was strange. It wasn't brutal or uncomfortable. Quite the opposite. It was intense. Wild, in a way. There was something in the way he moved, the way he kissed me, that reminded me of Esteban in our first months. That unbridled desire, that physical connection without barriers. I let myself go. I closed my eyes. I pretended I was someone else. I allowed myself to enjoy, if only for a moment. When it was all over, I lay next to him, staring at the ceiling. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and guilt that I didn't know how to process. Then I heard him say, almost like someone commenting on something unimportant, that it was worth paying his sister lunch to make this happen. In that instant, I understood everything. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment idea. It wasn't just a random dare. It was a plan. Alejandra sold me out. I was used. I was the prize, the grace, the novelty. And she knew it. I felt stupid. Humiliated, betrayed. But I said nothing. I stayed silent, pretending I hadn't heard right. I turned the other way, closed my eyes and tried to sleep. Not because I wanted to stay. But because I was already too broken to react. When I heard that sentence from Alejandra's brother, something in me broke. It was not only the humiliation of having been part of a plan, but the awareness that I was a willing accomplice of that manipulation. I had been used, yes, but it was not forced. I let myself go, I surrendered. And worst of all, I enjoyed it. As I tried to sleep next to her, not knowing if I should stay or leave, I remembered the times Alejandra used to make fun of girls who believe in eternal love. She used to say, in a sarcastic tone, that those kinds of women ended up alone or with husbands who cheated on them as soon as they could. What was better to take advantage of what one could give and receive? No dramas or silly illusions. At that moment, his words echoed in my head like a belated justification. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had been naive all along. Maybe I deserved this for believing that love was enough. For the next few days, I found it hard to look at myself in the mirror without feeling that mixture of shame and pleasure. On the one hand, I knew that I had been manipulated, that what happened was a transaction agreed between two sick brothers. But on the other hand, I felt alive. I could not deny that the sex was incredible. That the sensation of being desired so intensely made me feel powerful. For the first time in a long time, I felt that someone wanted me, even if it was just for one night. The surprising thing was that it didn't stay just for one night. Alejandra's brother came back to look for him. He wrote me through networks, commented on a couple of photos, asked me if we would see each other again. And I, instead of ignoring him as I knew I should, I responded. Cautiously at first, then more freely. We ended up meeting again. And then again. And again. Weeks went by like that. We met secretly behind the groups and Esteban's back. Sometimes at Alejandra's house when she wasn't there, sometimes in an apartment lent by one of her friends. We never talked much. It wasn't a relationship. It was something physical, dirty, clandestine. But addictive. It made me feel wanted, important, transgressive. As if I had finally stopped being the boring version of myself that Esteban had molded over the years. Suddenly, I completely fit in with the group. I was no longer the self-righteous one. I knew how to move, what to say, when to laugh, and what secrets to drop. I understood the dynamics, the veiled alliances, the power plays among them. I even began to notice how they patronized new girls coming into volunteering. I saw myself repeating the same patterns that made me uncomfortable before, and I didn't care. I felt that was the price for surviving there, for winning. At home, on the other hand, everything was different. Esteban was still the same, kind, attentive, even affectionate. But every time he tried to approach me with intimate intentions, something in me resisted. I no longer cared. It no longer turned me on. It wasn't just guilt. It was that he was doing it like he always did, with that leisurely, routine, predictable rhythm. Not like he did at the beginning of our relationship, when everything was new and spontaneous. When he took me by surprise, when he made me feel irresistible. Now he was more like part of someone else's, if there was time, if he wasn't tired, if he didn't have early meetings. And I, on the other hand, now knew another way to feel alive. So I started to avoid it. I would make excuses, that I was too tired, that I had a headache, that I had to get up early because of volunteering. Sometimes I would just roll over and pretend to be asleep. And he, as always, didn't push. He was never one to make demands, and that made me feel worse, because I could tell he was still a good man. And yet, I was betraying him. At times I felt guilty. I looked at myself in the mirror and I didn't recognize the woman I was. I wondered what had become of that version of me that believed in love, in fidelity, in commitment. But I would always come to one of my friends with her reassuring speech telling me that complimenting a partner was not betrayal, that no one could live for one person all his or her life, and that if my relationship was stagnant, it was natural to look for something that would give me back the spark. Now, if you're alive, I was told, that guy wasn't for you. And I wanted to believe them. Because to think otherwise meant admitting that I was destroying everything for nothing. Somehow, I ended up convincing myself that if he was still looking for me, maybe there was something more between us. That I couldn't just do sex if he came back again and again. That maybe, deep down, he felt something too. I started to have silly little illusions. Like maybe we could see each other more often or have regular dates. But it never happened. It was always the same, a brief invitation, a quick encounter, a curt message later. And still, I was still there. Meanwhile, at home, Esteban was beginning to realize that something wasn't right. He would ask me more frequently, and everything was going well, if I needed to talk about something, if I felt pressured. And I would always say no, that everything was perfect, that it was just the fatigue of volunteering, that I was too stressed by the reports. I would give him a fake smile, a quick kiss, and go about my routine. There were nights when I would watch him sleep and wonder what was wrong with me. How I had gotten to that point. But instead of stopping, one day he'd lay his head on the pillow and tell me it was too late. That I had crossed a line of no return. I was now part of another world. A world where the rules were different, where everything was a game, and I was no longer the same girl who claimed to believe in love. Esteban was no fool. He never was. Even though he didn't say anything, even though he didn't make scenes or ask insistent questions, I began to notice little signs. The way he looked at me had changed. His silence was getting longer, heavier. There was something in the air that told me that, if I continued on the path I was on, I was going to lose everything. I decided to finish what I had with Alejandra's brother. There was no scene. I just stopped answering him. I limited myself to rejecting his invitations and eventually wrote him a brief message saying that this could no longer continue. His response was cold. Basically, he made it clear to me that he didn't like being used for experimentation. It was ironic, considering that was exactly what he and his sister did with me. I didn't expect him to take it well, but I didn't care. I had reached a point where all I wanted was to get away from that world. I realized that I was losing something much more valuable by living out a fantasy that, deep down, never belonged to me. That's also why I decided to end volunteering early. And yes, you can leave early. You can quit at any time, even if it means not receiving the final certificate or the formal recommendation. For me, at that moment, that no longer made sense. I was no longer interested in that constancy if I had to continue to live as someone I didn't recognize. I knew that, even if I said I was doing it for work, in reality, it was all an excuse to justify decisions that were taking me further and further away from Esteban. I was becoming a version of me that I despised. And I didn't want him to know it. I didn't want him to find out and leave me. Ironically, I made that decision because I still didn't love. I told the girls that I had broken up with Alejandra's brother and was leaving the group. I told them that I hoped to see them another time, but inside I wanted nothing more to do with them. There were no tears or complaints. Just some uncomfortable looks, some sarcastic comments and dry goodbyes. They didn't like it at all, that was obvious. But as always they kept up the facade. In that group, no one shows weakness, even when breaking. When I came home that afternoon, I knew before I walked in. Something was wrong. As I walked in, I saw him sitting on the couch. He was not alone. Alejandra was with him. My blood rushed down. She stood up with a fake smile, kissed Esteban goodbye with a kiss on the cheek, gave me a neutral look and left without saying a word. I froze, wondering what she was doing in my house. How had she arrived, and above all, why didn't Esteban seem surprised to see her there? I sat down across from him and asked, in a trembling voice, what was going on. His look was hard. He just looked at me as if he didn't know me anymore. He told me that he already knew everything, that Alejandra had told him. That even at that moment, I was playing dumb, as if I thought I could still save myself, and that this was the confirmation of everything for him. And he finished me. Just like that. He told me that I couldn't go on with someone who had decided to change him for a game. That it wasn't just about sex, but about the lie, the contempt, my lack of respect for what we had. He told me that he hoped I would find what I was looking for, because he could no longer give me anything. I didn't know what to say. I felt empty. I didn't cry at that moment. I just sat there, silent, fine, or as I was leaving the house. I carried only a backpack with the basics. The rest I would pick up another day. Hours later, one of the girls in the group wrote me. It was not Alejandra, but another one of the girls who seemed calmer. And she gave me the excuse why Alejandra had told me everything. It was a group decision that they did it because he needed to know the truth. That, deep down, they only wanted me to free myself from a guy who, according to them, did not let me live. The message closed with a sentence that I can't get out of my head. Don't get angry. We only did it so that you could get rid of that fool. I wanted to answer her, to insult her, to shout at what she thought of all of them. But I didn't. There was no point anymore. What was done. And I had already lost everything. I tried to talk to Esteban again. I asked him for a chance. I told him that I loved him, that it was stupid, that I let myself be carried away by people who were not worth it. I robbed her to think about everything we had been through. But he was firm. There was no hate in his voice, but disappointment. He told me he could never trust me again. I had chosen who I wanted to do. And now I had to live with that. Today I live alone. I don't see the girls in the group anymore. I never heard from Alejandra's brother again. I didn't even get in touch with the volunteer organization. I didn't even want to ask if they could give me a partial certificate. All that, which seemed so important before, now only reminds me of what I lost. I lost my boyfriend. I lost my dream job. And all because of a stupid game, because of a group of fake friends, because of a childish need to fit in. The saddest thing is not that they dared me. It's that I allowed it. I let myself get carried away. I pretended not to see the signs. I pretended to be strong while I was destroying myself inside. And now, every time I look in the mirror, I don't see the victim. I see the guilty one.